Mhm. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Club Book with Ann Napolitano. My name is Pallavi Dixit, and I am a Minnesota based writer and author of the novel Edison. And I have the great honor of being in conversation with Ann this evening. Before I introduce tonight's fabulous guest properly, allow me a moment to tell you a bit more about the unique series that is bringing her to us. Club Book is a program of MELSA, the Metropolitan Library Service Agency, made possible through Minnesota's Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and coordinated by Library Strategies, part of the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. Washington County Library is the co-organizer of this evening's talk. Thanks also to partnering bookseller Red Balloon Bookshop. A purchase link to Hello Beautiful and Anne's other books will be available in the comments section of this live stream feed. You can have your order shipped, pick it up at their lovely store in St. Paul, or have them deliver it personally to your door if you are in the area. One final housekeeping note. Also in the comments, you'll see a survey link. It's quick and easy, and Melsa would greatly appreciate hearing what you think of this club book program. Our guest tonight, chart-topping novelist Ann Napolitano, is the author behind some of the decade's best contemporary fiction. Early career standouts include Within Arm's Reach, her first in a succession of poignant family dramas, as well as A Good Hard Look, a fictionalized biography of Southern icon Flannery O'Connor. Napolitano reached a still wider audience with Dear Edward, an instant New York Times bestseller, and today's show, #Read with Jenna book club pick. It was included on Best Books of the Year lists from publications as varied as The Washington Post, Women's World, and Library.Reads. Centered on Edward Adler, the sole survivor of a plane crash, Dear Edward is the basis for an Apple TV Plus drama, of the same name. Napolitano's follow-up, Hello Beautiful, is a family drama with echoes of classics like Little Women, but characters that are distinctly written. This loving homage to Louisa May Alcott's magnum opus is a must-read exploration of sisterhood, betrayal, and the ties that bind us. Hello Beautiful holds a unique distinction as Oprah's 100th book club pick. After a short talk by our guest and some initial questions from me, we'll have time for audience questions. Simply drop your questions in the comments thread here on Facebook, and our tech manager will route them to me. You can also send a message to Club Book through Facebook Messenger or email us at clubbookmn@gmail.com. Ann Napolitano, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's so wonderful to be in your company this evening. I'm so excited to talk to you about Hello Beautiful, a book that I just adored.
Oh, thank you so much.
For those in our audience who haven't read it yet, well, you definitely should, first of all. Hello Beautiful is an immersive, multi-generational story set mostly in Chicago, exploring the themes of sibling love and found family, and it follows the lives of William Waters and the four Padavano sisters. William, raised in a loveless home, finds solace and love with the Padavano family. Their evolving relationships lead to complex and emotional journeys um, through decades of betrayal, upheaval, and love. It's really the kind of book that you just fall into, and you can't wait to get home at the end of the day to read it. You put your kids to bed early so that you can get back to it, and it stays with you long after. And I invite you to tell us a little bit about how this book came to be and what your process was in writing it.
Okay. So my process has changed over the years. If you look at there being like, I'm sure there's more than two, but two ways generally for writers to approach their work. There are writers who plot everything before they start. So, like Ann Patchett and John Irving, for instance, are really famous for doing this, where Ann Patchett allegedly comes up with like everything in the book in her head first, down to the scenes and conversations that the characters have. so that when she starts writing, she knows everything.
Mhm.
And then the other way is considered to be like an intuitive writer, or it's sometimes called a pantser. So you like fly by the seat of your pants.
Mhm.
And this is what I was. So the best quote for this way of writing to me is there's the writer E.L. Doctorow said that writing a novel is like driving home on a foggy night. So you can
Mhm.
only see as far as the end of your headlights beam, but that's enough to get you home. You see a
Mhm.
little bit and then a little bit more and a little bit more. And then
Mhm.
there's your driveway. And my first two books I wrote with that method. And it's really fun because it's an act of discovery. Like a character would walk into the room and say something that I didn't expect them to say, and something would happen that I didn't know was going to happen. But in my second book, by going with E.L. Doctorow's metaphor, I drove in like figure eights all over the country before I found my driveway. I wrote like 400 pages that I ended up cutting. I couldn't find the book. I was meandering so much. I eventually found it, but it was really difficult. And
Huh.
so when I finished that book, my husband said to me, whatever your next one is, like, I think you should do it differently because you were in despair for a lot of that book. And this is a labor of love writing. So you should love it. Like you should figure out a way that works better for you. And so the method that I have used, the process I've used for the last two books, Dear Edward and Hello Beautiful, is that I try to combine these two processes because I am unable to completely plot a book. It doesn't work for me. But what I do now is that when I have the initial idea for a book, and usually for me that starts as like an image. So for Hello Beautiful, the image was of a lonely little boy dribbling a basketball. I had this vision of this little boy. And at that point, I set a timer, an invisible timer inside myself for 9 months, which I realize is the length of a pregnancy, but didn't occur to me when I came up with it. And for those 9 months, I am not allowed to write like what I call pretty sentences, because that's my favorite thing to do is to start writing a scene and to have the character come in and there's like a lyricism to the language that I'm following.
Mhm.
But I cannot think cerebrally at all when I do that. I can't figure anything out. The intelligence that I use to quote unquote when I'm writing like that is like a subconscious kind of intelligence, not an actual sort of realized one. So for those first 9 months, I I can't write, but all I can do is think, research, and take notes. So for Hello Beautiful, I had this idea of this lonely little boy dribbling a basketball. I had developed an obsession with the history of basketball. And when I teach, I tell my students they should pay attention to their obsessions, like what pulls your interest that makes no sense. Like you can't explain why you have this fascination with
Mhm.
documentaries about mushrooms or something that happened to your great grandfather that you heard about, but obviously never knew. Because often that obsession, there's something in it that has to do with your work. And each of my books actually has some personal obsession that wove into it. And for this book, I had become obsessed with the history of basketball, which made no sense. I grew up playing soccer. I'm married to an Englishman who's obsessed with soccer. My two children play soccer. Basketball at the time made no sense at all, but I could not read enough about the history of basketball. So I knew that basketball was somehow going to show up in this book. So I interviewed an NBA physio who helps NBA players when they get injured regain health, because that I knew that was going to be relevant in the book. Um, I I did reading about mental health in the 1980s because that has a relevant place in the book. Um, I Another part that figured out during that period was that I knew I wanted to set the book in Chicago, even though I've never lived in Chicago. My mother is from a big Irish Catholic family, and all of my aunts and uncles lived around us in New Jersey, except for one uncle, my Uncle Ed, who moved to Chicago before I was born. And when I was little, he would send me postcards, like of the Chicago skyline on them. And he lived in this neighborhood called Pilsen that's covered in murals. Um, and he would always address the postcards with the salutation, "Hello, beautiful." And I knew that he really didn't know what I looked like because he had like 20,000 nieces and nephews and he hardly ever saw me. So I felt like he was seeing that I was beautiful on the inside. And I was a very shy, bookish child. So I felt like if I did have any beauty, that's where it was. So it made
Mm.
me feel really warm inside. And because of him, like Chicago is this quasi magical fictional land to me. And William has some relation to my uncle. And so I knew that the book was going to be set there. And I had the idea that the father in the book was going to greet his daughters by saying hello beautiful, and that by doing that he was calling their specific inner beauty to the surface. um, so these are some of the things that I figured out during this 9-month period, as well as who I thought was going to be in the book, and then a few things that I was pretty sure was going to happen. I knew that two of these four sisters were going to become involved with William, but I didn't know what that was going to look like. And then the timer goes off at 9 months,
Mhm.
and I'm ready to write. But the timer for this book went off in April 2020. And for those of you that remember April 2020, it was obviously the very beginning of the pandemic. And I live in Brooklyn. I lived in this small apartment with my two sons and my husband. And during that same month, my father died. And because of the timing of the pandemic, like so many families, we weren't able to be with him while he was dying. And then we weren't able to gather when he died, which is so disorienting and difficult. And so the timer went off and I was ready to write, but I was in this state of grief and fear and worry, like the most disorienting kind of emotional state that I could imagine being in. But I was ready to write this story, so I started writing. And in many ways, I wrote my heartbreak and grief and worry and desire for love and connection and vitality into this book. And the book starts with William Waters as this sad boy walking into the story. And I really felt like the sad person next to him walking in with him. And I wrote the book in 2 years, which is very fast for me. And William emerges changed at the end. And I was too. Like so much of this book is my insides, and it moved me and moved with me through this period of time while I wrote it.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that glimpse behind the curtain of this magical book. First, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss.
Oh, thank you.
Um, but it really there first I have to say when I first learned about how you spend these 9 months just doing the research and collecting all of the material and the texture for the book before you even sit down to write, that to me just felt like so exciting. It felt like I have permission to do that now. I'm just research the thing I want to research, and I just love that um, that you came up with that. I didn't know that it was the first two books were a different process for you, and that you
Yeah.
were kind of doing the thing that I think is really difficult to just go kind of just feel it out and things emerge, and I find that very scary. Do you feel like the changing your process it did kind of succeed in making it less of a scary or upsetting kind of a process?
Yeah, I don't think I ever found it scary. I really do think it's like I think for figuring out I don't think there is right or wrong as far as any process for writing or creation of a book. Is really like examining the quirks of your own brain and what comes naturally to you and what doesn't. And then like for me, I think I moved so much in the first two, like the initial process ended up not working because there were no guardrails. I could go anywhere, and I didn't have like an overall sense of what I was doing. By
Mhm.
combining this 9 months of not being able to write but focusing on the story, with then by the time I walk in, there are guardrails up. I have some sense of where I'm heading. I know who the people are that are in the book. It allows me to walk in a much more educated and prepared way. And then it lets me do what I really do love, which is discovering, what's going to happen. I kind of think I probably know like 30% of what's going to happen in the book, when I start because of this 9-month process. So it's still like it's 60 or 70% that I'm figuring out as I go along. So
Okay.
if it does, it ends up working because a lot of the stuff I think up during the 9 months doesn't end up working. It doesn't end up having life in it once I actually, turn to the page.
Okay. So it's really a hybrid. Like you have
Yes.
a sense of where you're going, but you still have room to play.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about Ann Patchett, that she plots it out so just
Yeah. Which is
meticulous.
brilliant, like brilliant. I mean, but
Right.
I couldn't, like, I can't do that. Like, if yeah, it's just not. I could make something up in my head, but it wouldn't be true. Like, what my real like emotional, like what I love the most is emotional truth. And what I'm looking for when I write is what feels like emotional truth for my characters and for the story. And I can't really feel, it's like I feel like I write with holding like an emotional tuning fork, like a musical tuning fork. In each sentence, I'm like, is this true? Is this true?
Um,
Would William say this? And I can't do that in my brain. I have to do that with language.
yeah,
Um,
that
yeah, so I can't do it all.
that just makes so much sense that you are looking for emotional truth, because that's what I think was one of the things that was so beautiful about this book. Just
Mm.
it felt like there wasn't a false moment, and I could, uh, you were in each of their heads, and it didn't feel like somebody was writing about someone else. It felt like the narrator, the person writing the book, knew each person and had been in each of their heads, and it just felt really real to me. Like I felt like I knew these people. Um,
That's nice. I feel like they are real. So to
yeah,
be,
they are. They
I
are. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like I'm not, so while I'm doing it, I feel like I'm not so much writing a book as like finding, like unveiling a world that already exists and is real. And my job and my anxiety the whole time I'm writing is that I won't get it right. Like that I'll leave off like an inch of William's humanity that
Yeah.
is part of it and has to be there and I have to find it. So like by the time I'm done writing, I I feel like okay, it's all true. I have no idea if it's any good at all. Like when I finished Hello Beautiful, I was like, I think I've written some kind of like soap opera about these two sisters and a husband, and I don't feel like I had any choice as far as what I wrote. And then
Yeah.
I get nervous and anxious. Like so, it's not about making it good. It's about for me, it's just entirely like, does it feel true?
That's so true. Wow. Well, it worked. So um, I read that for this book, the process was, well, you mentioned that it was 2 years, the actual writing,
Mhm.
which is much faster for you than usual, and that you sent, or you shared more of it with your agent and editor than you did for previous books. Is that right?
Yeah, really because I worked with the same editor that I had for Dear Edward, whereas my much more normal for writer's path normally is that you sort of move around. So my first two books were published by different houses and different editors. And then I loved my editor for Dear Edward so much, and she wanted to buy my next book. So I sold it to her when I only had about 100 pages of Hello Beautiful. So then through the rest of the writing process, every like 60 pages, I would hand in that chunk and then we would discuss it. And because I really trust her and my agent and their taste and, that they want what's best for the book as well, it was, a really lovely and also efficient process kind of for this one.
Yeah, I wondered, I was going to ask you, like, was that uncomfortable? Because you had been used to not doing that and just kind of doing it with,
Yeah.
like, with the writing group, or, showing it to people,
Yeah.
but not necessarily editors and agents who are going to have notes for you.
Yeah. I would normally like recommend against that for writers, like, and I wouldn't have wanted to do it earlier in my career, because I would always be very concerned that understandably agents and editors have like an agenda. They have, and a lot of their agenda is like commercial and like what will sell and market and things like that. And that should have, to me, it should have nothing to do with like the actual writing of the book. So I would always like tell my students, generally you can't sell a novel before it's done anyway. I was only able to because Dear Edward had done so well. So this was, this was the first time in my career that was even possible. Um, and it was really just because I really trust these two specific people and felt like it wasn't like I was letting in a marketing team. I was letting in, two readers that I really deeply respected and love.
Okay. Oh, wow. I just want to go back to these sisters. Um, at the heart of the story are these four sisters, and I am personally, I've always been fascinated by the sister relationship. I have a brother, and we're very close, but I'm just amazed by how sisters interact. I kind of joke with some friends that they'll, with their sisters, have a huge fight in the morning, and then in the evening they'll call back and be like, "So, what are you making for dinner? What's
Yeah.
go?" That just fascinates me. So I loved reading
Yeah.
about sisters. Can you tell us a little bit about how you hit upon the idea to write about sisters? And did you have a favorite one or one that was easiest for you to write?
Yeah. So I have a brother and a sister, but when I was growing up, my best friend Leah, I slept at her house like half of the week, and her mother has six sisters, and they're all like 5 foot tall and have like slightly different versions of the same face,
Mhm.
and they're Italian American, and they fascinated me because they would like walk in and out of the house and finish each other's sentences, and they seemed more themselves when they were in the same room together than they did when they were separate. And I like watched them like they were television. And it was those sisters that I was thinking, I was like really delighted by the idea of trying to capture what that kind of sisterhood is, that kind of like pack of, sisters. So it was
Yeah.
them I was thinking of. And then when I was about 70 pages into the book, the Padavano sisters in the book started to argue over which March sister they were from Little Women. And it was only then that I was like, oh, of course, there's four sisters and four sisters. And there's Laurie on the outside looking in, feeling lonely in Little Women, and William on the outside looking in my book. And like they both become involved with two sisters. But I didn't think of any of that until that came up. Obviously, it was inside of me, and I loved Little Women when I was a kid. And so it appeared fairly late in my brain. And I would say I am the most like Sylvie, but
Mhm.
I actually feel like I share DNA with everyone in the book except for Rose and Julia. Um, so Julia was the most challenging
Mhm.
sister to write, but really only in the moments of like great change, like great challenge and change, because she was fun. Rose was very fun to write, but I didn't have to like Rose wasn't part of the engine of the story. And
Sure.
Julia was. So under moments of great pressure, I had to really write and rewrite and rewrite those moments for her because I couldn't feel how she was going to change. Whereas Sylvie and William, who are the two other characters who also go through these great challenge in the story, I like I could feel how they would respond inside me. So that it was much easier to write them.
Yeah, it just it blows my mind because I feel like Julia, like we just know her so well, and just to hear that she was the more challenging one to write is
Well,
just
I found her. It was just it
counter
took
that.
more. Yeah,
Okay.
it was a little clunkier for me to get there.
Yeah. Okay. And then obviously William is also at the core of this story, and he's this lonely little boy and then a lonely young man. So how did he come to you? And also, I know your previous, also beautiful, beautiful book, Dear Edward, had a lonely boy at the center, and I wondered if that's something you just gravitate towards. Will the next one have a lonely boy?
That's a great question. Uh, no, the next one does not have a lonely boy, so that's good. That hadn't occurred to me. Um, I'm like 275 pages into it, so I hopefully I would know by now if one of the boys was lonely. Um,
Hmm.
uh, I think so. William, as I said, like my first idea for the book was this lonely little boy dribbling a basketball, and I mean, it is true 100%. Obviously, like if you look at the last two books, Dear Edward is like about this boy who climbs out of a physical wreckage, and my the question inside of me as the writer was, is there any way this boy could be okay after what he went through? And
Mhm.
William really climbs out of an emotional wreckage because of what happened, because his parents are unable to love him because of something that happened in his family. And I needed to know if he could be okay.
Mhm.
So there's something in that, like that tension, that's like a fear that I keep writing to of my own.
Mhm.
When I started writing Dear Edward, I have two boys and they were like 1 and 3. And I
Mhm.
think I needed to know, if I wasn't there, if there was any way that the world could be kind enough to
Mhm.
make my my boys okay, if
Yeah.
they went through something like that and I wasn't there to help. Um, and something in William too, I just want to make sure that
Mhm.
if these boys run into walls, that it's possible to move through them as opposed to be flattened by them.
That's very brave of you to tackle that head on. I feel like I have kids too. I have an 11-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, and I think I even with TV shows, I just can't. I don't want to look it in the face.
Oh,
I think that was
I have a
really.
hard time with TV shows because it's like, I agree, like with my eyeballs, I have a hard time doing it. But yeah, so the books, I don't, it's like I am addressing the things that are inside me, and that fear sits inside of me. And so I don't have to be conscious of it like towards my children while I'm doing it, but I can be self-aware enough afterwards to be like, I have this fear that these boys won't be okay.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I love that basketball is such a major part of William's life, and it ends up saving him from sadness many times over. And you mentioned that you've done quite a lot of research about basketball in preparation for this book. Can you share with us a little bit about like what you enjoyed about that research? Were there any specific pieces of information that just kind of popped up that you were like, oh, this is so great? And have you considered finishing the manuscript that William? Um,
Uh, yeah, well, actually, I mean, addressing that first, like in my initial idea for the book, I thought, oh, I'm gonna do like 2 chapters of the book, and then I'll have like a chapter from William's manuscript. So I'll
yeah.
get to write. And I tried, like I wrote about, famous games and famous moments in basketball, but it's been done better, by other people, those
Okay.
like recapping of the famous, so it didn't work, like it just wasn't as good. And how I got there was I was doing a lot of reading about like the history of social justice in America,
Mhm.
which interested me obviously. And then over the last few years, was high, it's always relevant, but was very relevant. And I got really interested in the fact that the history of the basketball leagues in United States really runs in parallel and often intersects with the civil rights movement in the United States. And there's several key figures in basketball history, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who is Lou Alcindor, and Bill Russell, and others who were major figures in civil rights and also major basketball stars. And so that's what led me. So that's when I left sort of reading about social justice and started reading more about like the history of basketball itself. And I just couldn't, there's this feeling when I become obsessed with something that has to do with my work. It's like a Christmas Eve where you're so excited that tomorrow's Christmas. And I'm
Yeah.
like so excited to read the next book. And I read like all the nonfiction books about basketball. I read some great ones about like Michael Jordan. There's an amazing book by an amazing writer named David Halberstam, who's written a lot of great, sort of historical nonfiction books, called The
Yeah.
Breaks of the Game, which is about like the 1979 Portland Trail Blazers team right after Bill Walton left. And it's like he immersed himself, and it's like it's just a great novel. It's like an amazing story with like these amazing characters. And I just could not eat get enough of it. And then there's a language, if for any sport or anything like that, there's like a mastery language to it, to the plays, to what
Mhm.
happens on the floor. And I'm not fluent in that at all, but that was like another fun challenge to me, to try to capture that on the page in a way that felt true. even though I don't speak the language,
Yeah.
naturally.
I love how you just like lit up when talking about this book. That's like I feel that excitement. I was just thinking back to books that in my research that did that for me.
Mm,
And
yeah,
I noticed in your book the parts about like the actual game. I was like, okay, I don't know a lot of these words. I don't know these.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Love
yeah,
that. I
yeah.
have
It fascinates me.
I have about a million other questions for you, but we have
Mm,
audience questions coming in now. So
sure.
we're into some of those. Um, we have a question about your process. Do you have a certain amount of or a certain number of words you write per day?
No, I can't do it like that. Because it's not at all uncommon for me to sort of like delete,
Mhm.
um, a page worth of material that I wrote, over the past 5 days. So I'm constantly, most of the time, I'm working on a new chapter that I'm writing that has not been created yet. And in the course of that day, I will also return to the chapter or two chapters before it and revise those, like make them work better and smoother. Because writing the new pages is scary for me. So, like, by combining the two, where parts of the day I'm writing new and parts of the day I'm making what already exists sound better,
Okay.
works really well for me. And so I cannot, there's no like word count that would be satisfying. And some days I can write 8 pages, and some days I probably write, 2 paragraphs. But it's all about like how much did I exist in that world that day, as opposed to like how many words did I create, which again is like what works for you. There's nothing wrong with having number goals or anything like that. If that is like productive and motivational, fabulous. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah, everybody finds what works for them. And
Yeah.
um, let's see, another sort of process research question has been submitted. How did you determine that 9 months was the amount of time you needed to prepare your research? And is that fluid depending on the book, or are you locked into 9 months? Um, yeah, that's the question.
um yes, so how I came up with it was, like I said, my husband at the end of my second novel, A Good Hard Look, which is where I had despair. It was a very hard book for me to write in like a million different ways, and I learned so much while writing it. It shaped and changed a lot of my writing going forward. And my husband was like, we had these conversations about how I should change my process going forward. And he has a really different brain than I do, which is both annoying and very helpful. And so I think he was like, it was his idea, I think, for me to sort of take this period of time where I wasn't allowed to do the thing that I love to do the most, which is write the pretty sentences. And I think he was like, I think you should take a year. And I was like, oh God, no, I cannot do a year. Like that's insane. I'll die. And so I was like, how about 9 months? And so it ended up being 9 months. And then as soon as I said it to someone else, they were like, oh, yeah, the length of a pregnancy. And I was like, oh, yeah. So, like, 9 months is kind of as long as I can bear not to write. And
Okay.
so I've only done that for Dear Edward and Hello and actually, no, and I did it for this new book I'm writing as well. So it's not fluid. It's like it's been 9 months each time. And I feel like I can't change it because I can't make it shorter, which is what I would like to do. I feel like 9 months is a good length of time for me to both shed the book that I wrote before so I don't write another Hello Beautiful or another Dear Edward. It allows me to really move away from that one and move towards this new one and figure out as much as I can.
And during that time period where in those 9 months, do you do other kind of like prose writing, like essays or um, articles or reviews or anything like that?
Yeah, I don't do reviews, but the 9 months usually ends up overlapping with sort of uh the prior book coming out, like, or like, so like Dear Edward. So I Dear Edward came out in January 2020, and I think I started writing Hello Beautiful. Oh no, yeah, I started writing Hello Beautiful in April 2020. So 9 months prior to that meant, I don't know, can't do math, but like let's say in August I started my clock and started thinking. So like that means like the last 5 months before Dear Edward came out, I was thinking, taking notes and whatever. And during that period in a publication process, they ask you to write essays for magazines and things like that, or like I'm doing Q&As. I'm doing like a publicity stuff for the book that's coming out. So it's actually a nice marriage. Like I have these other responsibilities, and then I'm also taking notes and thinking and doing research for the book that's coming up.
Well, that's really interesting that that timing worked that way, because then you're not doing publicity for a book while you're writing, like,
Right.
physically in the next one, because
Yeah,
would that I would imagine that would just be a
that's
hard.
impossible.
Yeah.
It's like actually impossible. I always say to writers like the 2 months before your book comes out, you're like useless. Like there's no I'm lucky that I can like think, research, or take notes during that time. There's something about like the no matter how like zen you are, and I'm pretty zen in general, like about this kind of thing, it's very agitating to your system to know that your book is coming out and that people are going to read it and it's being reviewed during that period and stuff. So you cannot do the deep work. So this being in that phase where I'm in the 9 month, phase allows me to like to do work without being deep about it and to do the other things that I need to do for the book that's coming out.
I'm so glad you said that, about that it's impossible to do both the
Yeah.
publicity. Yeah, I have one novel that came out, and I'm still doing publicity for that, and
Mm.
I get asked a lot, "Are you working on the next one?" And I had been kind of getting it going, but then all the book came out, the publicity started, and I just like stopped, and I feel really
Yeah.
guilty about it. But
No, don't feel guilty.
tomorrow
I
I'm going
don't
to
even,
start research.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I don't even think that that's like a each their own. I actually just do not think across the board that it's possible in the 2 months before. Every writer I know, it just frazzles your brain.
Okay, that helped me a lot. Okay, but let's
Okay,
not
good.
therapy session for me. Um, I was just curious about, just going back to your research. What is that like? So you have 9 months of research. What does it physically look like? Do you have like notes and cork boards, or is it all like in a Word document? Like how does your workspace look? How does that research look?
Yeah, so I use a different program. Um, okay, so from when that first idea is, I use a program called Scrivener, which is Scrivener, which is fairly well known. It's I think used mostly for like screenwriting. Um, but I actually find it really helpful for a couple reasons. One, I only use that program for the thing that I'm working on. So like Word, eventually once I'm like 200 pages into the book and the writing, I'll move it out of Scrivener into Word just because it's formatting it works better and printing and sharing at that point. But in the 9 month process and even in the beginning of the writing, I like having it in that place because it actually has a corkboard function. So you can take notes and see it on this like visual corkboard. It's a very easy program to import research into. So if I read an article that is relevant, I'll copy it into the folder in there that says like plane crash
Okay.
documentation or whatever, and I can see all my research. And then I will have like files in it. Like I'll have a file for Rose and a file for Julia and one for Sylvie and one for Emily and one for Cecilia. And every idea I have or anything I read that I feel like has to do with those characters, I put into that file. So like it gives it like a landing place for everything.
Uh-huh.
And that is like so that's the most of what I do. And I'll have like pages of notes in there for each of those characters, and probably like a third of it will end up, showing up in the book itself. Like I don't limit any of there's no idea that's too stupid. Like it all goes in there at that point because I'm just trying to like plant seeds and see how they grow and see what feels sticky to me, and some of it'll just blow away. And then yeah, so that's the process that I use.
I'm fascinated by that. When you move to when you're leaving Scrivener and then going into the Word doc, Do you
Yeah.
still like, do you still kind of toggle between
Yeah.
them? You do, okay,
Yeah,
so
I still right now, yeah, I still have Scrivener open on my laptop now for the book I'm working on at this point because I keep all like I have like a page on it that's ideas. So I'll and then as I um as I move forward and I've researched, so occasionally I'll go in and read those files, like 'cause it'll give me ideas, or I'll have forgotten some of the things that I was thinking. So I'll read through my ideas page again to see if something works. So yeah, I keep it and I do toggle back and forth. I'm just actually writing in Word at that point.
okay. And when you have, and this might be this question just for me, but when you where you're reading, like physical books, do you read like actual physical books, or do you read um ebooks, or so I'm just curious, like when you're reading a physical book, then and you want to take some ideas from that and put it into Scrivener, do you just
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah.
If it's that, like, so for the basketball books or whatever, that the ones that were the most like impactful for me, I would I don't do ebooks, so I actually listen to audiobooks all the time. And then I'm asked to blurb a lot of books. And so and those you get sent like a advance copy of the book. So I'm often reading a physical copy as blurbs, blurb to blurb books, and then everything else I'm listening to. But when I listen to or read a book that is relevant to the research, I will buy it as an ebook and then it'll be on my computer as well. And then I will copy and paste or highlight, because you can highlight like in the, Kindle function or whatever, the books, like the piece of information that I want to have reference to. So I will end up, the only books I own on ebook are books that are relevant or like most important. I'm like, I have to have like fingertips on this, these sentences.
Oh, I just loved that answer.
Okay, good.
Another question in from the audience. This person says, "I enjoyed reading Hello Beautiful, and at first looked for more similarities between it and Little Women. I appreciated that there weren't that many. You wrote your own storylines for the characters. Do you have any other favorite classic books that you might like to do an homage to?"
Yeah, so it's not a rewrite of Little Women because I didn't even, Little Women didn't occur to me until I have 70 pages into the book. So I know some of the marketing makes it sound like it is a rewrite of Little Women. It is an homage to Little Women in that once I saw it, I was excited once I saw the similarities. And like for instance, particularly like the idea that there's a Beth in every family, in every group of friends, any collection, there's one of you is Beth. And it's this tension of like, oh God, which one of us is it going to be? That I was like, oh, I can definitely, this makes sense for what this book is, etc. Um, but I never would have set out to rewrite Little Women. Little Women is a massive classic. Like I wouldn't never deign to attempt it. So I wouldn't attempt. I mean, never say never. Every book I don't know what it's going to be, and then when it comes to me, I'm like, okay, I guess this is what it is, and I don't get to choose it. I don't feel like I choose what I write about. I feel like if I'm figure out it comes to me, and then I have to do it. So I can't say I would never do that, but I hope I never, attempt to rewrite a classic or, retell a classic.
I guess sort of along the same lines, like as that question, like do you have like certain influences, like influential books that um, kind of have influenced your whole body of work, or this particular book that we're talking about today?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I do. I said recently that I feel like I'm about 70% fiction and 30% human woman at this point because I am always listening to an audiobook and I'm reading a book and I'm writing a book, and
Mm.
I'm way more comfortable really in the world of fiction than I am in the human world. Um, so yeah, that is more real to me and more of an influence on me than real life. Um, So like when I was growing up, John Irving was like a huge writer for me, like his big fat juicy novels that are so character rich, like
Mhm.
kind of my dream would have been to write like a my own version of a John Irving novel. Um, I read Ann Patchett when her first novel came out, and I think she's like 4 years older than me or something like that. Um, but I loved her work right away, and it felt like, okay, maybe I could do something like this. I was a real like Henry James was I was like a major Henry James dork when I was in college. Um, there are several things that I've read that just like blew my brain open and made me reimagine what was possible in fiction. Um, and then like so the book I'm writing now, um, I read The Overstory by Richard Powers, which won the I think the Pulitzer, I don't know, let's say 10 years ago, but I just read it I don't know, 3 years ago or something like that.
Mhm.
And it blew my mind. And it's about trees and all these different ways. And he's brilliant. And finished when I finish a book that like blows me away, I always seek out like every interview I can find with the writer about the book. And in a bunch of the interviews that he gave, he said the same thing, which was that he thinks it's the responsibility of contemporary writers to diversify their storytelling and
Mhm.
not just diversify it in telling the stories of different peoples, which is, of course, incredibly important, but to diversify their storytelling in that they're telling the stories of the earth that we live on and in, and that work by the writer is necessary in order to help elevate the consciousness of people in a way that it needs to be elevated for us to have a chance to continue living on this earth with
Yeah.
fixing taking care of the earth, etc. And so that book and then hearing that, I felt like, oh, I have to try to do that. That seems correct. And so the book I'm writing now is about these three families that live on a cul-de-sac, actually the street that I grew up on in New Jersey, but it's
Mhm.
also about the trees on that street. So that's an example of a book that sent me directly into writing a book. And I do feel like that's not uncommon for me.
Okay. So have you done a lot of tree research these past?
Yes, that was my obsession. That became my obsession for the last few years. I've read a lot of books about trees, and it's similar to basketball to me. Like it's a language and a mastery that I do not have,
Mhm.
and you can get as technical with the language about trees as you can about basketball as you can about surgery. So like that's also like that's fun to me, like as far as part of the research process and trying to like understand it on enough like on 7 out of the 144 levels that there are so that I can pretend to speak it, is it's
That's
part of the fun.
Will you continue to read books about basketball and then books about trees later, or does it stop with each book?
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, because like my second novel had Flannery O'Connor in it, and
Mhm.
I haven't been like I had obviously had already read all of Flannery O'Connor's work. There wasn't that much of it, but I don't like to study her kind of anymore.
Mhm.
Basketball, I am still very into, and you mentioned I follow the Golden State Warriors, and like I follow the NBA as like a collection of characters and narratives that are I'm fully bought in on and interested in. So if a
Yeah.
great book on basketball comes out, I will read it. I still am, but maybe it's because it's closer. And then trees, I'm still in it. So I think it depends. I guess it depends. I didn't want to write about Flannery O'Connor. I didn't feel like I had a choice and I really resisted it. So that may be part of it. Writing about
Oh,
basketball was actually very fun.
okay. Okay. So it depends on the subject.
I think
Flannery
so.
forced her way in, and
Yes.
basketball
Yes.
was already a big.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have so many questions, but we're nearing the end. So I definitely wanted to ask you about libraries because we're library people here. And in Hello Beautiful, there's a library, of course, that plays a prominent role in the life of the Padavano family. And it seemed to me while reading the book that you must have a deep love and respect for libraries. Was there such a library in your childhood or in your present life?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't, I mean, I guess this is true of virtually any writer, but I couldn't be more passionate about libraries. I actually think they're incredibly essential, magical um, parts of our society that I feel really grateful still exist. I know they're deeply underfunded at this point, but they're such amazing service centers for humanity, that it almost feels like they're too good to be true within like the scope of the world that we live in at this point. And when I was growing up in this town in northern New Jersey, my parents would drop me off at the library every Saturday with a duffel bag. And the librarians knew me. And so generally there's a rule that you can only take out like 15 books at a time, but they waived the rule for me because I was very good about returning books. So every Saturday I would fill up the duffel bag with books, go home and read them all that week, and then go back again with my duffel bag. And I read everything, and like there's a magicalness to being a child. I had no idea what genres were. I had no idea what like classics were or high fiction or low fiction. So I read everything. I read like all of Zane Grey and Louis L'Amour, like the westerns. I read like Lois Duncan and all these sort of like scary thrillers that were big then. I read, The Yearling, Sweet Valley High, like just everything I could get my hands on. And it was the best reading time of my life, because I had, no great responsibilities, and everything was new. And also, I feel like when you're like young, you're empty on the inside. You haven't like built yourself yet. And so these books that I read, which include Little Women, like became part of my DNA. Like now when I read, there are books that I love that I get so excited about, but I don't have any room inside me anymore. So they don't become part of me in the same way that the books that you read and you love as a child like literally shaped me. So and that's thanks to the Ramsey Public Library in northern New Jersey.
Yeah.
So, and my children, of course, I also took, to the library. They're teenagers now, but they spent their childhood in our local Brooklyn library.
Yeah.
um, and I
Yeah.
couldn't be, more enthusiastic.
I feel like that there's a book there with that starts with that image of the young girl with lugging the
Duffel
bag.
bag.
We have um, just in response to what you were just talking about, a recommendation from the audience. Somebody has said that you should read a local author, local to Minnesota author, a book by Allison McGee called "The Telephone of the Tree." She's
Oh, okay.
this book. I'm assuming I haven't read it, but I'm assuming it's
Telephone of the Tree.
yeah. I'm
Okay.
assuming that must have to do with libraries. I'll have to look at
Hmm.
that.
All right,
Um,
look it up.
okay. Oh, we only have a few minutes left. Okay, we're going to do a rapid fire round of 5 questions.
Okay.
Okay. The first 2 questions have to do with New Jersey, which I also grew up in New Jersey. So, one, Bruce or John Bon?
Oh God, Bruce. But I mean, I really like John Bon Jovi's Lovely too.
Okay. Yeah, you could say either, neither, or both also.
Yeah.
Second question, is it William Waters or William Waters?
Oh gosh, William Waters. Did
Better.
I just say that? I think the first one is how you said it. William
I
Waters.
think I put that on there because I thought I heard a little bit of Waters from you.
Well, that's the New Jersey.
That's the
Um, yeah.
that's,
So
I
yeah,
wasn't sure
it's
if you had that New Jersey accent in there or you're trying to
I
come.
do have it. Yes.
In the movie for the part of William Waters, Timothy Chalamet or Chris Hemsworth?
Well, uh,
Or
Chris
some,
Hemsworth is too built, like too,
okay.
ripped and everything, and Timothy Chalamet is too much life, mischievous joy in his eyes. I mean,
Okay, yeah,
I imagine he's a good actor, so he could probably dampen that, but like it has
right.
to be someone who's like soulfully
Yeah.
there has to have like a melancholy to their face. Like I'm too old to cast anybody, but like if he was about 50 years younger, There's a Midwestern actor. Oh God, it's not Jeff Daniels. Is that his name? He was. Oh gosh. Well,
Sure.
some of you in the audience will know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Um, and he's like has like colorless hair and sad eyes. I mean, yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
someone like that.
That's funny because I also had a hard time even coming up with names of young people.
No, I can't. Like the people ask me like who would I cast as the sisters, and I'm like, I'm way too old to choose anyone who would be age, could
Right.
work.
Maybe just the same four women who played the sisters in the latest Little Women movie, and Laurie
Oh,
played Timothy, or Timothy Chalamet was
yeah,
played Laurie.
Lori. Yeah, I love that version. It's wonderful
Yeah. Okay, writing in the morning or writing at night?
in the morning.
In the morning. And finally, Michael Jordan or LeBron?
Well, I really can't choose. Michael Jordan is a great character. Actually, they're both great characters. LeBron, the way that he has literally like built himself and maintains himself. He is 40 years old playing in the NBA at like a athletic level that's inconceivable. And he spends like literally $1 million+ a year on his body and what he puts in it and how he treats it. And that's fascinating. And
Oh,
Michael Jordan is so competitive and mean and charming and so I can't choose. Like they're both fascinating.
I love how you answered it not in terms
I know.
of the
Basketball.
greatest of all time, but who's the best character? That's perfect.
Exactly, exactly. That's how I think about the world.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, I wish we had a lot more time with you. I've loved this conversation. Um, but we'll let you get ready to go cheer on your Warriors tonight.
Oh,
And thank you so much, Anne, for spending
well,
time with
thank you.
us.
I really enjoyed it too. And thank you so much. And thank you so much to everyone who's here.
Oh,
I really appreciate it.
we are so thankful that in the midst of your busy spring, you had
Oh,
some time for us. I'm just going to turn to some housekeeping things now. Thank you all for being here. And this has been a virtual presentation of Club Book, a long running literary series of MELSA made possible by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Special thanks again to the Washington County Library for the part they played in bringing Anne to us. Before you log off, look for the Club Book survey link, which is in the comments um, and will be projected in place of my video momentarily. Last, consider joining Club Book on Wednesday, April 30th for their next program. This one featuring fiction phenom Alison Espach, sorry if I mispronounced that, author of Today's Show, #Read with Jenna Book Club Pick, and #1 Indie Next Pick, The Wedding People. You can learn more about that and other upcoming events at clubbook.org. Have a great night, everyone.
thank you.